All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of Millennials Are Killing Capitalism Live. Today, I'm very excited to welcome three organizers from three different organizations who are, and probably a few of them are part of multiple organizations, of course, but representing three organizations. And we're going to be talking about Shut It Down for Palestine. And in particular, we'll start by talking a little bit about the action that they have called for Black Friday, which is this Friday, November 24th. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of what they've been up to over the last few weeks. They've had, prior day of action, maybe multiple, and I know that they've been busy. So I'm excited about that. And then at the end, hopefully, we'll have a little space for the audience to engage and ask some questions too. Make sure you do the basic things and, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this conversation with folks so that as many people hear it as possible. Um, and then we'll just get into it. So I'm going to read out some intros of our guests. And so we have Layan Sima Fuleihan, who is a popular educator, organizer, the education director at the People's Forum, and an editor at 1804 Books. For folks who listen to our podcast, you'll know that we've done a couple of conversations on books that have been put out by 1804 Books, and actually we have one that's coming out, isn't edited and released yet, but with Eugene Puryear talking about the Black Belt thesis as well. We have Miriam Osman, who is a New York City-based researcher, educator, and organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement, a great organization. Very excited about that. And Carrie Zaremba, who helped lead a successful campaign to pass a BDS resolution in student government as a member of Claremont's SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine chapter, and as well as their JVP, which is Jewish Voice for Peace chapter. She has served on the media and messaging and political accountability committees with National Students for Justice in Palestine. So welcome to the stage, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this conversation today. I'm really excited that we get to host this and excited to be in conversation with all of you. So to start, let's just start with this action that's coming, this week, Black Friday, November 24th. I think it's important that we start off with that. People hear about that because it's the current, really, quickly approaching call to action. So, Miriam, why don't you start a little bit with on this one and just talk about this action, what's being called for on Black Friday and why, and then Layan and Carrie, I'll ask you to fill in the gaps too. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having us, Jared. It's really great to be here. I'm really excited to be part of this podcast. So for this Black Friday, our message is that there can be no celebration and no business as usual while there's a genocide being carried out right before our eyes. So the Palestinian Youth Movement and the Shut It Down Coalition, we're calling for multiple things, but one of them is a consumer boycott. So we're asking people to refrain from making purchases, and particularly, from companies that have material ties to Israel that are on the BDS list, and material ties to the ongoing genocide. And what we need to understand about our power here is that as consumers, as workers, we do have serious economic power, and we've seen, right, if we withhold our labor, what will happen. And if we refuse to engage in this, honestly, bloody spectacle of consumerism that is Black Friday, then we can really hit where it hurts, which is profits, right? And what we're doing basically through this boycott is sending a message to politicians, to the capitalist class, to the class of people who basically have interests in preserving the status quo and preserving U.S. imperialism and, by extension, genocide. We're sending them a message to say that we refuse to go about our lives as usual, while a genocide is happening, while over 12,000 Palestinians have been martyred. And at the same time, Black Friday is a big event. Like economists and investors, they use Black Friday to kind of assess the overall economic health of the country, to see like the average American's confidence in their discretionary spending. And we're saying that we're disrupting this economy. We're distorting this picture of economic health because we know, first of all, that that's the only language that the ruling class really can understand. And we know that that economic health is coming at the cost of the millions or billions of people who are living under the thumb of US imperialism around the world. So that's a bit about the boycott. We're also going to be having protests. Maybe I'll pass it to one of my co-organizers here to talk a bit more about the mobilizations that we're planning.
Yeah, Layan, why don't you pick it up, and then Carrie will get to you.
Sure. Well, again, thanks for having us, and it's really great to be here in conversation with everybody. On top of the boycott, something that we've been seeing over the past 6 weeks has been an extremely high level of struggle. People are going out into the streets and making their views heard, expressing their solidarity with Palestine, whether or not things are being called. We're in a really unique moment where the mood is rapidly shifting. And maybe we can talk about it a little bit later. I won't spend too much time on it now, but we saw a dramatic shift from October 7, where suddenly all of the media institutions were trying to basically criminalize solidarity with Palestine immediately, create a blanket of fear. And only in a matter of weeks has this completely shifted. And the mood of people in the United States is actually the opposite now. People are really taking action of their own initiative. And it's something that we want to just strengthen and give people more confidence to continue doing, because it's a really powerful moment that has a huge impact actually on the political arena. And so the boycott of goods that are connected to the settler project of Israel is something that is extremely strong tactic that historically has really been somewhat the backbone of international solidarity with the Palestinian movement. It's a tactic that has been used in other moments in history as well, like the struggle against the apartheid regime in South Africa. And we're in a moment now where we really feel confident that people are not only going to boycott, they're going to go and make sure other people boycott too. They're going to disrupt business as usual. And so we're calling for people to rally at commercial centers. Black Friday is the most profitable day for the US economy. And people are understanding now that the US economy is the main funder of Israel. The state of Israel would not exist at this point in time without subsidizing from the United States economy. And so it's the task of all of us, and we're making the call because we're also confident that people want to do this. It's the task of all of us to make sure that we do everything in our power to disrupt that flow of profit that is directly feeding the weapons and the military assault that is massacring tens of thousands of people in Palestine right now, but that also has been carrying out this ongoing genocide for decades. So we're putting out this call. I think what we've seen over the past couple of weeks has been not only an increasing number of actions. It's been actually hard to track all the actions because there's the call on the shut it down days. We've had November 9 and November 17. And so lots of things happen. They're concentrated in those days, not only in the United States, but around the world. But of course, things are happening every single day. And they've only been increasing in a number and the breadth of participation, but also in diversity of tactics. I mean, people are getting really creative. They're getting creative in a way that's going to make an impact both on business as usual, as we're calling it, and also on the consciousness of people, to really, make it so that it's now normal to stand against genocide and stand with the colonized and stand with the Palestinian cause. It's a really beautiful thing to see that coming more and more into just common sense, and it's about time also. So we're really expecting November 24, Black Friday, to be even stronger and to show even more strength and more diversity. And also in particular because it's not new to boycott Black Friday. I mean, activists and people who are in struggle against U.S. capitalism and imperialism have seen this day as a symbol of the excesses of capitalism and exploitation. People have made calls, especially from the Black liberation struggle, and in other moments have made calls to boycott Black Friday. So it's really a moment where a lot of different struggles can converge, and really expecting it to be very powerful and impactful.
Right on. Carrie, as I pivot to you, I'll say this too. I mean, I think, we had Carrie Peterson Smith on last week. We did a panel discussion on the film The Lobby, which goes in it, and it was the cut that deals especially with the student movement. And one of the things that he said in the panel afterwards was, that he feels like people are rediscovering kind of popular power also, and I think that connects to what Layan was just laying out in terms of the diversity of tactics, these large groups of people mobilizing in a variety of different ways, and Black Friday, obviously you have a potential to interact with a lot of people who may not be that politicized around this. Also, if you rally in commercial centers and stuff, because people will be out. And so, Carrie, just if you want to say anything additional about that day, but also about what's going on around the country with regard to this right now.
Yeah, nothing too much new to add. Just want to echo, we're seeing tons of mass engagement, popular people power. I also think one thing that's important to note is just the history of boycotts in the Palestinian movement long before BDS. During the British Mandate period, boycotts were a tactic frequently used to target the Zionist economy. And so those historical resonances right now are definitely, I think, being felt in the movement. And yeah, I guess in terms of this week, I think there might be a teach-in or webinar in preparation for Black Friday. And so just stay tuned for any announcements as far as engagement goes and toolkits and other calls to action on the website, the Shut It Down website.
Yeah, right on. Let me actually pull that up real quick for folks. So before I go to the next question, just want to share this with folks. All right. So just wanted to share, this is the shutitdownforpalestine.org website. The link is in the show notes. It's a, really nice looking website, but also you can see where you can get information on November 24th, register your action, toolkits, and so on. So just keep an eye out because I know you all are constantly updating that to see more of what is going on. Appreciate that and want to uplift that. All right, so let's move to another kind of talk a little bit more about this coalition you all have, because obviously you are all from different organizations here, important organizations in our country, and in particular with a history of work around Palestinian liberation. And so say a little bit about kind of coming together from this, how that happened, and why it was important to do that in this time. And yeah, anything you all want to add to that? Carrie, if you want to start with this one, we can go the other way around the circle.
Sure. So the Shut It Down Coalition is a group of several different grassroots Palestinian and leftist organizations, and it came together pretty organically, just out of a need, and in this current moment, and organizations and groups that we've worked closely with before. PYM and NSJP, for example, has a very long and tight relationship. Most PYMers are former SJP students, and so there's kind of like continuity there. And I think with Shut It Down and with the coalition that we've gathered, every sector is represented and every sector has a way to get involved, whether it's students, media, healthcare workers. And so I think that broad appeal is very powerful right now and reflects the unity that we're seeing in Palestine, which I think is something that also gets lost in the narrative right now, that it's many actors who are unified and fighting together for liberation. It's not just one faction or political group. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of how Shut It Down came to be. And I know all of the groups that we work with, or all of our bases, were already doing organizing, and we're already mobilizing in this moment. And so Shut It Down offered a vehicle through which we could coordinate and centralize these efforts, and so that they have more power. Yeah.
Yeah, Layan, do you want to continue on that?
Yeah, it's so amazing actually to be working with this coalition, and also, since even before the Shut It Down call was made, we were working with a coalition of many organizations to organize the March on Washington on November 4, which turned out, I think because of that coalition work, turned out to be the largest march for Palestine in U.S. history. And it was really incredible. And I think the success of it is due to that moment in which everyone sees the priority right now to be unity, and to be working together. And it's been really amazing to be working with organizations who have been embedded in not only the struggle for Palestine, but the struggle for justice in all of its forms, who are coming together and sharing experiences and tactics and strategies, and really looking at what we're up against, which is not just calling for an end for a foreign government somewhere to stop enacting violence, but it's to ask this government to stop its imperialist agenda and stop funding genocidal colonial projects, and supporting it. It's not just funding, it's complete political support as well. So it's been really awesome to work in this coalition. And I think the Shut It Down for Palestine call came from groups, like Carrie said, who are representing different sectors. And part of the vision for Shut It Down for Palestine is that everyone could take action in the context that they're in. It's not, we can't all go to Washington every day. I wish we could just be outside the doors of the White House until our demands are met. But actually, that's not necessarily the most strategic, because it's not just the White House, it's the entire U.S. system. And so this framework gives a mechanism for people to feel empowered to build the struggle in their own context, in their own sector. So we've really seen different areas of society take leadership on this, and to join. Since we put out the call, there's been many, many more organizations who have joined, endorsed, who are taking initiative. And then community members are looking for those organizations, joining them, putting out their own calls, inviting them. So it's really beautiful to see this unfold. And I think the basis of it is this, coalition work is very important. And it's the basis for allowing this kind of diverse cooperation and coordination to happen.
Right on. Yeah, Miriam, in your response too, if maybe you could pull that out a little bit more, like how do people set up their own actions? Like how do you all think about this type of call in terms of, obviously you all have several organizations, but you're not trying to do everything yourselves here. So yeah, just go ahead.
I think I was muted. Was I muted?
Yeah, I think so. You're good now.
Okay, great. But yes, totally. That was, again, part of the idea of this is getting out the call to the broadest, most diverse sectors of society, and seeing, making sure that people can plug in whatever way makes sense for them, right? So we've seen students do walkouts. We've seen media workers get together and organize and do sit-ins. We've seen people take on direct actions of their own accord. Small business owners have been able to shut down. And at the same time, if these kinds of things aren't feasible, we've also seen individuals take actions like wearing a kufiyeh to work, or on the subway, and making sure that Palestine remains in everybody's minds all the time, and that nobody loses sight of our demands and what we're fighting for. So, I mean, it's honestly, it's been really beautiful and energizing to see what people have done with these shutdown calls. And in particular, I think every sector of society right now is realizing the power and beauty of organizing together, not just of shifting consciousness, but of actually getting together and doing something. And that's been reflected in some of the organizing meetings we've had. There was one, I remember there was a high school student who spoke just so beautifully about being organized in their school. And yeah, it's really energizing to see. And I think, it signifies how important Palestine is, not just how important this moment is for Palestine, but also how important Palestine is for the left in general in the US, and how we each have our own role to play, right? So for PYM, we know, for example, that our role and our intervention is really in building power in Palestinian and Arab communities in the diaspora, in revitalizing our institutions and politicizing our youth, and that's our role to play. But at the same time, we know that this struggle really requires a broad front, and that's where things like this coalition work and the shutdown call are so important, because we suddenly, I mean, not suddenly, right? It's been years of work, but we're in this moment where I think there's a mass shift in what we're seeing on the ground, and I'm really excited for what's to come in the movement, and I'm feeling the strength of our demands growing every day.
Appreciate it. So talk a little bit about, and maybe you don't all need to respond to this one, but you're welcome to if you have things to add. But what are some of the things that have already happened in response to this call? Talk about some of the actions that people have taken. Miriam, you can just start with that as well.
Yeah. I also, before I start with that, I also want to say something about the November 4th action rally in DC, because we actually had a geographer with some expertise in this recently tell PYM that his estimate for the crowd was closer to that we underestimated. It was closer to somewhere between 500 and 600,000. So I think that reflects the scale of the energy right now and the momentum that we have. And again, that's been reflected in the types of actions that we've been seeing. So we had, after the November 4th rally, we had our first shutdown call on November 9th. It was widely answered. We had massive student walkouts. We saw direct actions at weapons manufacturers, at media institutions, like I said previously. Right after November 4th, we saw the Block the Boat campaign as well, actually stopping weapons from being loaded into ships going to Israel. And then we had another call on to shut it down on November 17th. And I can speak maybe to a couple examples from New York, right? We campaigned with hundreds of small businesses around the city who shut down that Friday, and in solidarity with Palestine. And it's really beautiful because it also carries on a long tradition of Palestinian shopkeepers who shut down and respond to calls in Palestine. Another really incredible moment from this last shutdown was in San Francisco, the shutdown of the Bay Bridge. It was so powerful to see sit-ins and disruptions at political offices, at different corporate offices, events hosting Zionist speakers, right? It's really the whole list of actions have been taken up brilliantly and with so much energy all across the country and the continent and the world. Yeah, I hope I'm not forgetting some key examples here.
Well, yeah, Layan or Carrie, if you have ones that you want to add, feel free to, to share.
Well, maybe I can jump in. I think Miriam, you covered the breadth of it. It's so many to capture. I think we counted around 300 November 9 and at least double that on November 17, but I really think it's way more because that's just what we can count. the shut it down call helps like give people a way to kind of connect their action so that people can find it. But even then, it's really hard. And I mean, Miriam, you covered, I think, the breadth of it, and it was really fun to see also, and really inspiring to see how the small business campaign actually showed that really all sectors are for this. I mean, people were willing to close their doors and willing to do more than that. They wanted to help spread the announcements for the rally. They wanted to bring people. They wanted to donate. So it's really beautiful to see how people are just taking responsibility and initiative for this. I'll just add that it also resonated around the world. People have from across the Arab region and in North Africa and across Asia and Latin America and Europe, there have been many, many different actions. People have been joining the Shut It Down call and taking action on those days and on others. It's really important to see the massive mobilizations that have been happening in Jordan, in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Lebanon, in Indonesia, where it's not so simple to come out and express yourself in this kind of way. And we saw the impact what the Indonesian president said to Biden by surprise. He said they were just talking about climate supposedly, and then in the final press conference where you're supposed to just make everything look happy, he suddenly comes out and says, I really, really hope that Biden is going to do something about this situation and push for a ceasefire. So you can see the mass mobilizations around the world. It's not just in the United States, but I think it gives a lot of people a lot of hope to see in the heart of imperialism, people are standing up in mass. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And also on the 17th, this was also the day of international student struggle. So we saw a really intensification of the battle on the student front, which is one of the key battles right now. Maybe Carrie can talk more about that. But we see that the Zionist backlash is really going after students, and that's historically true, also have really like dug their heels in on campuses and tried to intimidate people because of the power of student struggle. I think it's a sign of how effective and how strong it is. But the 17th was a day where students around the world were really standing up. It's a historical day. And so that was a really big part of the last shutdown call.
Yeah, I'll add a few more comments about the student front specifically. Want to echo the international breadth of these actions. We saw students in the Philippines, France, Morocco, India, the Netherlands walk out, do actions in support of Palestine. On Turtle Island here, we're seeing the student movement for Palestine at its strongest that it's ever been, despite this repression. And it's not only being led by SJP and JVP chapters, but we're increasingly seeing the participation of groups like Anak Bayan, dissenters, affinity groups, even Muslim student associations that previously didn't have a hard stance on Palestine are now coming to us saying, how can we help? And so that's a really powerful thing. And we're also seeing SJPs expand beyond the universities where they already had SJP chapters. We're seeing high school SJPs, community college SJPs, HBCU SJP chapters, as well as a burgeoning faculty justice for Palestine movement, law school justice for Palestine movement, or law school students for justice in Palestine, sorry. And so we're seeing SJP as a banner, as an organizing framework be spread throughout the country beyond where we've seen it before. And we've seen really amazing actions, both within Shut It Down, as well as actions that groups are taking up on their own in universities. For example, at Brown, Jews for Ceasefire formed basically overnight, it seemed like, and occupied one of their administrative buildings and got arrested. Columbia University right now is definitely in the spotlight because they disbanded their SJP and JVP chapters. And then several days later, they announced a coalition, which at the time was 40 and it's now 66 organizations. Columbia Students, I don't remember what it's called, like Columbia Students for Against Apartheid, a group. There's organizations that are diverse as poetry organization, affinity groups, as well as traditional leftist groups saying, well, you can shut JVP and SJP down, but you can't shut down 66 student organizations. And so I think the coalitional support we're seeing right now is really where the power of the student movement lies. And it's because of the work that SJPs have been doing well before October 7th that we're able to mobilize and organize in this moment for people who are now trying to join their SJP chapters or just join these demonstrations on their campuses. And so it's a really exciting time. Another example that comes to mind is at Berkeley. The other day, I forgot what the name of this tower is called. It has like some historic name. They did a banner drop, and it was the first time that students have coordinated a banner drop at this specific tower since the 1985 protests against apartheid South Africa at Berkeley. And so those historic analogies are also really, really coming to light right now when we've seen students emulate those tactics at Stanford right now. There's students who are doing, who have an encampment similar to like the shantytown movement. And so so Shut It Down is a great framework because it allows new chapters who've never done an action before, as well as chapters that have divestment campaigns that have been doing this work for decades, to all enter where they need to enter and to pick up the movement and to incorporate the Shut It Down demands into the work that they've already been doing on campuses. But yeah, I'm happy to go into specific examples later about some of the stuff we're seeing on the student front because it's very exciting right now. But yeah.
Right on. And yeah, maybe we can get into that a little bit after this next question, because this is the last the last one I had for the three of you. And then folks, if you're in the chat, I see one question in there already that we'll get to, but feel free to add another one. I think we'll have a little bit of time to take some audience questions at the end. So the last thing that I just wanted to talk about is anything that you all want to add in terms of the analysis, from your organization of the current situation in Palestine, or, relatedly, to we've kind of talked about the ways that the U.S. obviously is, I mean, complicit isn't even the right word, right? It is our war as much as it is Israel's, and not our, but the United States, but the so I guess mainly I would be interested in stuff that you all would want to uplift in terms of Palestine in this context. Miriam, if you want to start.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really important question, and there's a lot of things that you could say, but I think I have a few things to add here that I think are helpful. First, I think we need to realize that every day that passes without a ceasefire is a day where more Palestinians in Gaza are martyred. So we can't lose sight of the gravity of what it means for each day to pass. So in that sense, there's no way for us to allow our momentum to falter. And in fact, we need to be continuously growing our mobilizations and building our movement. And in short, what we're doing is creating a political climate in the US that makes continued support for Israel untenable, right? So I just want to amplify this call for everyone to join us in this effort and join the united forces of the world who are fighting for liberation and dignity. So I just, I want to start with that we can't forget the daily atrocities of Gaza. But, I also think that something that's been interesting to see and a result of this moment happening here is what we've been calling the sharpening of contradictions in this country, right? And what we mean by that is that people in the US are now able to identify the oppositional forces of this moment and the systemic character of oppression and exploitation, not just here but around the world. So people are coming, organically because of this current crisis, to a realization that their politicians don't represent them in any way. They're realizing that, increasingly realizing American democracy is a farce, right? They're understanding that the political and economic system that they live under is not only okay with genocide, but actively funding it. And it's these same people, I think, that are realizing that the traditional modes of operating are no longer going to work, right? So I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing so many people advance more radical demands and do more radical, take up more radical work, and why so many people have gotten plugged into the shutdown moment. So I think paying attention to these contradictions in this moment is going to be really important for our analysis moving forward. And then the last thing I want to emphasize, going back to Palestine and regarding our demands a bit, is that it's really important to remember that our demands do not in any way end at a ceasefire, right? A ceasefire is the minimum, and a ceasefire is what's going to allow Gaza to breathe under this assault, right? And it's absolutely necessary, but it's not in any way our only demand, right? Gaza has been under siege for the last 16 years, and the population of Gaza is composed mainly of refugees who were displaced and dispossessed of their land in 1948. And, all the people of Palestine have been fighting for over 75 years, an ethnic cleansing campaign at the hands of the Zionist settler colonial project. And it's intensifying dramatically today, right? So we're seeing intensification, not just in Gaza, which, I want to point out that the number of martyrs in the last month and a half has already more than doubled the number since 2006. So it's really a massive intensification. It's a genocide. But also in the West Bank, the effects of the colonial project are intensifying in the West Bank as well. We're seeing intensification of displacement and settlements, more instances of settler violence in the West Bank, more forced disappearances, a much higher number of Palestinian prisoners who are held, with no charge under administrative detention. There's over 100 Palestinians have been murdered in the West Bank as well. So overall, we need to recognize that the ceasefire is the immediate demand, but the call for the ceasefire is also coming in a context of a call to lift the siege on Gaza, to end U.S. aid to Israel, and above all else, to free Palestine, because the only path forward from this is the liberation of Palestine. So I just want to underscore that and highlight, the importance and scope of this moment and this movement.
Yeah, right on. Layan?
Oh, I think I want to emphasize the urgency that Miriam put out. I mean, I think it's hard for people to grasp the level of devastation and unspeakable horrors that the people of Gaza have been subjected to for now over a month. And every hour that passes, it continues. I think this is one of the reasons, and I think we shouldn't underestimate human nature, that this is one of the reasons why it has been impossible for the Zionist media narrative to maintain its grip on society. People are not able to witness the little that comes through mainstream media, the little that is reaching people, because there is such a blockade, a media blockade on the truth of what's happening to the Palestinian people since before this new iteration, this latest assault. When people see even a little bit of it, they cannot not say something or do something or question the narrative that they've been fed. And I think what you said, Jared, is extremely important. This is not just the Zionist war. It's not just Israel's war. It's a U.S. war. I mean, we saw what happened with the bombing, the siege of the Shifa hospital. The White House comes out and says, hey, there's a Hamas operation base underneath the hospital. A couple hours later, they're under siege. Basically, we have to understand that the White House is not just paying for this genocide. It's not just a question of changing the profit flow. The White House is orchestrating this. And as much as they're uncomfortable right now, we need to keep making them uncomfortable and sharpening those contradictions, like Miriam said. We need to make it very untenable for them to continue doing this. We know that the United States has no concern for human life. I mean, we know this. We've seen its behavior, its agenda across the world. We saw what happened in Iraq. We saw what's happened in Libya. We saw what's happened in Vietnam. We've seen, there's so many examples. There's too many examples to be able to list. And so it's not necessarily always a question of convincing our officials reminding them of their own morality, because unfortunately that's not what they're operating with. It's the morality of the people who then are coming out to put political pressure on their own government and demand that this government actually act the way it says it is. If this was a democracy, there would not be this subsidization of a genocide right now. And so people are understanding this, are becoming more and more clear. It is making an impact. I mean, we finally saw a somewhat human piece come out of the New York Times a couple of days ago, where they kind of talked about the pain and suffering of losing this number of children in this genocidal assault. You know, the New York Times has been really a mouthpiece for the White House in many ways, and only after masses of people went up against their doors and really showed, you know, if we wanted to, like, there's a lot of people there. There were a lot of people on the doors, really showing the New York Times that there are masses of people that are against this kind of clearing the ground, the media ground for genocidal war. And finally, a few articles came out that maybe were a little bit more balanced. Of course, I'm not calling the New York Times balanced, but what I'm trying to demonstrate is that we are putting these institutions back up into a corner, and they are feeling the pressure, and they need to make some concessions. So we need to keep pushing, and we need to keep putting pressure, keep mobilizing, and making sure that we are putting as much pressure as possible, because every minute that passes is a horrific minute, and it is directly connected to the White House in Washington, D.C. And I'll just end with, you know, I feel a little bit bad for the White House, because this is now the latest in a series of crises that are really delegitimizing it as some sort of world's moral, ethical power. I mean, after COVID, after the uprisings against police brutality and white supremacy, the ways in which the U.S. government dealt with these crises that were mainly felt by the working and oppressed peoples in this country has just showed its true character and made it very common knowledge to people that this is not an institution, a government that represents the well-being of humanity. And there are more and more people coming to this conclusion, whether it's about Palestine or any other issue. They're seeing the true nature of the system. And when we're organized, we can make change. History has shown this many times, and it's showing it right now. So I do think that the impact is going to be felt, and that we do have a very serious role to play, because it is going to make an impact.
Yeah, right on. And I appreciated, I mean, I think one, as Miriam, as you said, like, it's important not to be satisfied as, you know, with just a ceasefire. It's also important, you know, as you said, Layan, that, you know, we're seeing these small shifts now, and it's important not to let the small shifts make us feel like, oh, okay, well, we're winning, or like, I mean, it is a representation of the organizing and all of the mobilization, but you know, we have to keep it all. It is actually a sign in many ways to turn up the pressure, I think, as opposed to sort of let it out a little bit. So yeah, Carrie, if you want to add on to that, or if you want to say a few things about, you know, a few more things about student organizing in this moment, you know, that would be great too.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess I'll speak a little bit about the repression and try to connect it back to this larger political moment. So criminalizing Palestine solidarity work and using tactics like lawfare is not new, but right now we're seeing it at a level that we haven't seen since the immediate aftermath of 9/11. And so I want to emphasize like how racialized this repression is, and the disproportionate impact that it has on Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim students who are facing the brunt of this backlash, while also who are also experiencing violence from both within these institutions, but also the people who are most immediately impacted in the U.S. because they have families back home who are being murdered right now. And so I think that that's important to emphasize, as well as the fact that these techniques and this suppression is a form of fear mongering. It's meant to distract us. It's meant to put SJPs on the defensive, and so that we are meant to justify our existence instead of organizing for what we're fighting for. And so I want to emphasize like how important it is to keep organizing in the face of repression. And we've seen that smear campaigns and targeting have not impacted SJP's work, but they still impact. That doesn't mean that they don't impact discourse on campus. And so I think it's really important for other people, faculty, staff, parents to show up for students right now who are supporting the Palestinian liberation struggle, especially just given how the media coverage, right-wing fear-mongering is not working. And so they keep upping their tactics in ways that are only more violent and repressive. And so I want to emphasize for students how important it is to keep organizing and to ensure that the message doesn't get lost. I think oftentimes people want to turn this discourse into a question about academic freedom in the US, and they try to situate it within the sort of campus culture wars, instead of situating the student movement within the Palestinian liberation struggle and as a front in the Palestinian liberation struggle. And so don't let the message get lost. Like, while it's important to do what you can to protect your SJP chapters, remember that we're fighting for Palestinian liberation and that we do have demands that are a lot larger than our campus context. I also want to say, like, I think that it also speaks to the power of BDS, both in terms of Palestinian liberation struggle, but also BDS as a threat to the neoliberal university. I think divestment in an era of like privatization, financialization, and corporatization of the university is a really, really big threat. And when we can link these issues like academic repression, austerity, surveillance, campus militarization, police brutality, and link it back to Palestine, that's how we expand our base. And get people who otherwise wouldn't be able to have Palestine in their analysis into the equation. And so I think BDS is really critical in the like larger context of the university as a site of political and economic regulation, and BDS as one of the only ways to challenge the settler state within such a framework. And so I think that's one of the most powerful things about BDS. And so, yeah, basically, in short, keep organizing. The repression is intended to distract us, and the best thing we can do in the face of this repression is to keep organizing rather than play into it. And then I guess lastly, we're seeing a lot of people mobilize right now, but we need to turn that mobilization into organizing. And the best way to do that is to join an organization. And so I encourage y'all to all fight. Like, if you aren't already a part of an organization, there's so many out there, and it's a great place to find a political home and to really channel your energy right now. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So that's it for my questions. I see one here in the chat, and then, if other folks want to add them, please feel free. And if not, I'll also give y'all a chance to say anything that you would like to say in closing. So this was just a question of if there's anything that you all know of that's going on Thanksgiving Day, which should also be boycotted for obvious reasons. Thanks. I think I'll just say, from my perspective, Thanksgiving at least is a great opportunity to connect, the U.S. history of settler colonialism with the settler colonial project in Israel. And so I think that there certainly is a natural, kind of point to be made in terms of linking up those histories and understanding also, settler solidarity is a real problem for in both contexts, and so thinking about that and thinking about how to disrupt and support decolonization, land back, so on and so forth. But yeah, if any of you have anything that you would say to that, I don't know if you are aware of any actions that are occurring in that day. I'm sure that there will be something, because there is something every day, it seems like, but it may not be, I don't know if anybody.
I guess I can start and say, well, one, your premise is, I think, shared by many, Jared, that Thanksgiving is there's already been so much political education done around Thanksgiving, and this is in many ways a commemoration that's meant to sort of whitewash or erase a genocidal history against Indigenous people in this country. And so the call that Miriam started off with, which is no celebration during genocide, we could even amend that to say no celebration of genocide during genocide. And we're really pushing for that. We're also asking people, keep struggling. There's always a sense of slowdown during the holidays, which I don't think is going to happen this year. Maybe slow down in terms of work or things like that, but in terms of the level of struggle, definitely not. It's going to be increasing, intensifying. So there is going to be, I'm sure many, I know we're working on something that will be released soon, a teach-in for those who are with their families, who want to be connected, to take the time to develop their own understanding of what's going on around them. But I am also very certain, I'm sure everyone has seen online, that there's going to be many diverse actions on Thanksgiving to make sure that everyone remembers what's going on. Things are happening every single day. I'm absolutely positive that there will be many actions, many creative actions that are really getting to the heart of the contradictions and the hypocrisy of the manufactured culture of this country, not the culture of the people who live and work here every day, but the one that's manufactured, that I think Thanksgiving, the narrative of Thanksgiving is part of. And so I guess I would just say for everyone to stay tuned and keep looking, follow Carrie's call to join an organization so that you get the updates and the plans. Everything's moving super rapidly. We're turning actions around in a matter of hours at this point. And so definitely keep posted. And I'm absolutely certain there will be many things to join.
And as just oh, sorry. Can I add one more thing? As a potential resource, read Inner Nationalism by Stephen Salaita. He's one of the great scholars of our time, and he wrote about Indigenous studies relationship to Palestine. And it's a really thought-provoking way of thinking about BDS as a struggle that's being played out on Turtle Island, and our positionality as settlers here. And so I really encourage people to check out that scholarship. It's really, really enlightening, and it's a way of thinking about Palestine through American Indian and Indigenous studies here.
Right on. I was just going to uplift this comment. Somebody said they saw a TikTok trying to shut down the Thanksgiving Day parade at Macy's, and I didn't see that TikTok, but I'm sure it exists. So one question, this is a good one. So discuss the tension between an effective call to shut it down associated with mass protests and the more radical direct action and civil disobedience happening. How can each support each other? So I take this to mean, obviously there's mass protests, there's sometimes family friendly rallies and events and things like that, and then there are people who are taking riskier direct actions at different points that are going to risk arrests and things like that. And so how do we have a good ecosystem or climate of these different kinds of things, do you think? Miriam, maybe you're going to start with that one.
Yeah, definitely. I think
hang on, you muted yourself, I think. There you go.
This is a consistent problem for me, I see, is muting myself. No, but I was going to say that I think, one thing I might amend from that question is I don't necessarily see it as I think what was the term used, that it's not a contradiction, but tension, right? I don't see these things as being in tension at all. I think each type of action has its role, and it's all part of a bigger strategy, right? So when we see mass mobilizations, like this is it's a way to mobilize a very large number of people to come out on the street, and it also is highly disruptive in its own right. And we see it costs cities like millions of dollars to be able to deal with the types of mass mobilizations that we've been carrying out over this time. And I see these things, as a continuum of action, right? They feed into each other. People who may be, initiated or like begin to be more politicized through a mass mobilization eventually might participate in a direct action. And, I also, I first of all like salute and love direct actions, and I think they're incredibly important. But I also want to push back against a tendency to see, getting arrested as like the epitome of doing something, right? We all have a role to play. Some of us can get arrested, and some, it's not a safe option, or anyway, the point that I'm saying is all of these things are disruptive. All of these things feed into each other, and we have to have a united strategy that takes into account all of the various types of actions in order to actually have a mass movement. And with that, having important direct actions and also having these mobilizations. So I don't really see them as being in tension with each other. But yeah, maybe someone else has something to add to that.
No, totally agree. I think you put it perfectly. I think I agree that they're not in tension. In fact, they create conditions for each to grow. I do think that, and it's both ways. I would also hesitate to make some sort of continuum between one and the other, like, one is introductory, one is more developed. I think that it's actually, they feed each other. And we're in a moment where people are taking action, and some of them are direct actions and some of them are different forms. But it is important that we keep increasing the level of participation. And these mass mobilizations, I think, shouldn't be seen as not disruptive or as less impactful, because in particular, we're in this for the long haul. I mean, the days of Zionism are numbered. I feel confident. I don't know how many numbers that is, but I hope it's few. But at the end of the day, we have to keep going, because it's not just Zionism, it's the entire U.S. war machine. And we really want to have create the basis for mass mobilization that leads to stronger organization and stronger power of people in struggle. And we're going to need people to get involved in that way if we're going to go through the long haul. There's been many examples of, very big spontaneous mass movements that are quickly repressed without organization. And I think something that all of the people who are involved in these calls right now is something that we're aware of. And there's so many organizations that can take up that task. So we're really well positioned, I think, right now in this moment. But having that kind of massive participation, that massive taking of the streets and the cooperation between organizations to make that possible is something that's really important, I think, for the longevity of the movement. And of course, I also love and salute and participate in direct actions. I think that they are really good at doing what Miriam and PYM have so beautifully put as sharpening contradictions, can really help push forward this no business of usual. There's people who are disrupting the daily lives of these politicians that are orchestrating the genocide at anywhere they go. They really have no escape. There's no escape for the Palestinian people, while there's going to be no escape for those who are funding and orchestrating the mass murder of Palestinian people. So I think that the creativity of the movement right now is super strong and super high. And it's our task to be supportive of this diversity, because the more diversity of tactics that we have, the stronger the message is going to be felt.
Yeah, I guess quickly, I think a good example of how these are not mutually exclusive is the Stop Cop City movement. which has involved a lot of deep and intentional organizing as well as direct actions and mass mobilizations, and each has helped each other grow. And so it's important to have, organizations as bases and as support systems, but these aren't mutually exclusive whatsoever. And so I think the Stop Cop City movement is a really good example of how these two can work in how they do work in tandem.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it's about communication, between different groups and stuff like that, and understanding, you know, certain actions are a place for certain things, and that doesn't mean that necessarily like you're opposed to other things at all, right? But you know, I think a lot of it comes down to, who are the organizers that are setting it up and what is their vision for the thing that they're trying to put together. And I think, and I agree totally in terms of Stop Cop City as a example movement that can be lifted up of a lot of different tendencies, a lot of different preferences in terms of the types and forms of action that people want to take, but also holding space for um, mass movement, for electoral movement, even as well as pretty militant direct action. So yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna bring this back just because we talked about this early in the show, but we didn't necessarily directly address this question. I mean, as I understand it, Black Friday, it's a larger boycott. It's basically boycotting Black Friday as an event, but the question, I guess, is whether it's focused around BDS and BDS institutions, or like all sites of commerce and consumption. And if the second, the question of why that strategy. I think this was spoken to a little bit, Alex, in the beginning, but if anybody wants to just kind of clarify this point, that'd probably be helpful.
I can start, maybe. Yeah, I think that the call is twofold. Actually, it's both of what Alex put forward. BDS is a tactic that has been developed for so many years that is really effective. The list is really thorough. It's really helpful to be able to trace exactly how not just the U.S. government, but the private sector of the economy is also responsible for subsidizing the Zionist project. So we're going to, of course, try to disseminate and make these resources available. Some folks have a really great idea of getting, there will be stickers that you can put on products in stores to mark how that they are actually funding genocide. There's a lot of creative things that you can do with the BDS list besides just your own personal boycott. There's also things to divest from. Carrie and NSJP has a lot of experience with divestment campaigns, especially in universities. But we're also trying to understand Black Friday as a symbol of the U.S. economy as a whole, and the U.S. capitalist economy as a whole, and its culpability in carrying out not only this genocide, but the assault on humanity across the world. And so the framework, I think, can also help where people who are coming into the struggle can connect it to their own reality. I'll give an example that maybe it's a little farther away, but it will come back. On November 9, we did an intervention in the office of BlackRock in New York City, the headquarters in New York City, which is one of the funders of weapons companies, the main weapons companies that are responsible for producing the instruments of death that are being used right now against the Palestinian people. But BlackRock is also an asset manager that is responsible for the buying up of massive numbers of homes in the United States, that has contributed to the housing crisis, that has contributed to the crisis of houselessness for so many people that are suffering in poverty in this country. And so it's an opportunity to make a connection between people's lived reality and a reality that seems far away, but is actually connected through the enemy. I mean, the enemy is the same. And that's the basis, I think, for going beyond an empathetic feeling about what's happening to the Palestinian people, but seeing their cause as the cause of people here as well. And that strengthens the movement. And so I'm saying all that to say that what we hope will also help push in this Black Friday call is that we can connect more and more people and help more and more people see clearly the objective basis for their solidarity with the Palestinian people. There's the boycott list, of course, but in a sense, everything should be boycotted at this point because all of it is funding the capitalist and imperialist U.S. system that is primarily responsible for the misery and oppression of humanity across the world. And so those tools will be put out there, and I think that we need to sharpen the BDS campaigns wherever we can. There's parts of the country where there will be less of those familiar names that are on the list, and that shouldn't stop people from taking action. We really need to understand the U.S. as intrinsically tied in every way to the Zionist project, and so that's generally how I would respond to it. I'm sure Miriam and Carrie, you have more to add to this.
No, I think you put it really well. I don't have much to add there. There's the famous quote that I like from Ghassan Kanafani, the Palestinian revolutionary intellectual, where he says the Palestinian cause is a cause for revolutionaries everywhere, right? It's that understanding of the sharedness of the objective conditions and what we're up against, and that it takes all of us to fight what we're up against right now.
Yeah, and I think the power of BDS is that it can be enacted at so many different levels, at the individual, like micro level, at the meso level, like within our institutions and universities and spaces, at a more macro level, at a national level. And so it's really something that can be deployed in a variety of ways. And I think this Black Friday call requires us or encourages us to look inward in our own consumer choices and how in our own relationships to the settler colonial state and our own positionalities. And so I think that's kind of like an important moment of reckoning for us all to have as organizers in solidarity with the Palestinian people right now.
Yeah, and I think you all kind of made this point, but I think it's very important for people to understand that we see quite clearly in this moment that the state of Israel is not like some, I mean, first of all, within global capitalism, all countries are connected through the flow of capital. But the state of Israel is not some independent, self-sustaining nation state, right? And so understanding the amount of sheer money that the United States is providing in the form of military aid, is basically critical to understanding this issue. And so I think that also, to just I think highlight the point that you all are making, that it certainly makes sense to primarily target, the BDS list and to focus on that, but also to understand that, this boycotting of, all consumer goods, these things are connected. It's not as though it is just the companies on the BDS list, which are, again, like BDS should be supported, and it's been, a lot of people have put a lot of very good work into this campaign, and into targeting specific corporations for a good reason, but also understanding that there is a much broader complicity. I'm laughing a little bit because somebody has shown up into the chat to put a bunch of Israel flags in, so um but so we've got about 5 minutes left. I do want to let you all go because I know that you all have busy busy days. You all are all very busy organizing right now and moving from thing to thing, and I appreciate all the time that you spent with us. But if any of you want to offer any closing remarks, then feel free.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It's been really great to be here and for uplifting this call for Black Friday. I just want to encourage everyone to participate in whatever ways they can, not just on Black Friday, but moving forward. It's going to continue. This struggle is, we're making progress, but it's far from over. And like I said earlier, for the Palestinian Youth Movement, what we want is nothing short of the liberation of Palestine and all of the Arab world from the forces of Zionism and imperialism. So yeah, thank you for uplifting our calls to action from this coalition. And as an aside, I would also encourage people to look at the history of U.S.-Israel relations and look at, how the U.S. has used Israel to basically undermine any kind of socialist movements in the region and any kind of attempts at self-determination that would threaten the U.S. control over the region's resources. But anyway, that's just an aside. And the history is there and for everyone to see. And once again, I hope to see everyone taking action on Black Friday and beyond.
Right on. Thank you.
I just want to echo everything Miriam said. One, the thank you for making time for this, for echoing the call, for helping us reach more people to join. And then the aside that you gave, Miriam, I don't think should be an aside. I think that this is something that I hope everybody takes a serious look at. And there's plenty of resources that I'm sure everyone here and other organizations can provide on this history, because I think what it does is not only does it show the entanglement between the U.S. imperial project and the Zionist project, but it shows the fact that these things are not inevitable. They are calculations that are made by people with a particular position in power in a particular moment in time. And it is true that struggle, and in particular class struggle, it has the possibility to change the correlation of forces. And I think that people should feel excited and confident, because at the same time as that there is unspeakable devastation happening right now to a people who have been in struggle, in protracted struggle for so long, there's also a moment, we're also witnessing right now a turning point in history. And I don't think we can underestimate that. Now, more than ever before, the question of Palestinian liberation feels much more real. There is a changing dynamic. And so it's only a call for us to go further, to go harder, to push as much as possible, because if we don't let up now, if we use everything that we can, we have the ability to keep pushing this changing correlation in the direction that we know is the right direction. And we should feel confident that we know that we are on the right side of history and that we have a very serious role to play. I really don't want to underestimate that, because I think sometimes we don't see the gravity of the situation while we're in it. But we're in it right now, and we have the capacity to do something about it. And so it's really just been so incredible to see so many people from so many different backgrounds, families, workers, people inside the White House, even recognizing this and doing things. And so it's just so also heartwarming to be able to be in struggle with so many different people and to feel really we are the majority of the world. So I just wanted to end on that and say also one more thing is that I know that now I feel very confident that it's going to be much harder for the capitalist media to deceive the US population with the efficacy that it might have had before. But just a note that we shouldn't be deceived by the things that may be coming out. We saw some rumors of a 5-day truce. Was it yesterday, the day before? Everything is a blur now. But we have to be so clear about our demands. We know that it would not at all be sufficient. That would not at all respond to the gravity of the situation. And that we are the ones who determine, who can evaluate, and who can identify what the demands are and when they are met. And so, yeah, I'll end on this and with a big thank you, and to see you all in the streets.
Thank you. Yeah, Carrie.
I'll try to be super quick. Follow National SJP on Instagram. We also have a donation link on our website. What else was I going to say? Oh yeah, push push BDS like within your union spaces or within your, if you're a professor within your academic associations, like the AAA Association, Boycott, American Studies, Middle East Studies is actually really, really important as far as the academic front goes. And I think that's the role of faculty, is really pushing those within academic associations. Lastly, I want to uplift the call from students and youth in Palestine right now who are calling on a week of action from November 29th to December 7th. The details of this will be publicized shortly, but this is a direct call from students at Birzeit and other universities in the West Bank. And so I think it's really important for us to uplift those efforts and to coordinate our actions alongside them. And lastly, I wanted to thank you for having me and uplifting Shut It Down on this podcast.
Right on. Well, I'm, honored to have all of you individually and collectively on this podcast to discuss this with our audience. Thank you for all of your important work. Salute to you. And, I hope folks, I hope we'll see each other in the streets. I hope folks get involved with this call and follow other calls that you all will be a part of. And keep up the pressure. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.